Alright guys, we're going to be inspired by Yayoi Kusama, and we're going to be making pumpkin sculptures. We're going to be starting with a bunch of trash today. So what you're going to need is a plastic bag and something to fill it in. I have newspaper here, recycled paper works, even more plastic bags work just fine, but you essentially want it to be like pretty full. The fuller, the better in terms of this project. So I'm kind of crumbling it up and then shoving it in. I do want to separate each piece. So for example, I'm not taking this whole section and crumbling it. I'm taking out one page at a time, crumbling. It doesn't work well and you won't get a very good result if you have a bunch of layered newspapers that you're trying to shove in. All right, a couple more here. So our goal today is to get the shape of the pumpkin, and after we're done with this, we're going to be taking advantage of tape to make the sections in a pumpkin. All right, now my bag is pretty full. I'm going to kind of smush it around to get that newspaper to be a little more crumbly. The crumblier, the better. That way it kind of holds the shape as the pumpkin. All right. Now I'm going to go to the top and I'm going to tie it. The tie is actually going to turn into that little handle on the pumpkin that you hold. So giving it a nice tie, and I want to double knot it. So I'll slow down a little bit and show you what I'm doing there. So here is the strap. I'm doing one strap in front, one in the back, then I'm bringing the back one over and through the center. And then I'm repeating to make it a double knot. So I'm bringing one over the top, and then the one that's in back, I'm gonna bring through the center. All right, now I have a bag full of trash, and I'm going to use tape to create sections in a pumpkin. So to do this, I'm gonna start by making my pumpkin divided in half. So I'm starting right at the top, and I'm dragging the tape around. And I want there to be a little bit of tension there, meaning I want it to be tighter then. So you can see it made this like little lumpy bump on my pumpkin. Okay, so I divided it in half one way. Now I'm gonna go the other way. And I needed to lift up my handles to do that. That's no problem. And again, I want it to be tighter. I don't want just like loose tape. I want it actually to kind of pull the bag in on itself. This makes it look more like a pumpkin because pumpkins actually have little defined areas. And then I think I'm going to divide mine. Currently it's in quarters. You can see a quarter here, a quarter, quarter, quarter. I think I'm going to divide mine into eighths. So I'm going to divide each of those quarters in half. So I'm wrapping around. And it doesn't work to just like willy-nilly throw tape all over. You really do need to make it like lines that bisect the pumpkin. So again, I'm dividing my quarter into half. So this is really like fraction work, right? Because I started by dividing it into quarters, and then I divided my quarters into eighths. So you're going to use some math knowledge here today. Now for this step, we're going to use the tape to wrap this. So I'm going to fold mine in half, and this can be a little bit tricky, so if you're struggling with this step, ask for help. So I'm just taking a little run of tape, and I'm going to wrap it around. I want to turn that not into a little bag strap, but into one solid piece. That'll make it easier for me when I work on my next step, which is going to be to cover my pumpkin in plaster. Plaster is an art material that artists use to make sculptures. We are making a sculpture today. All right, mine is almost ready for plaster. The last step for today is to take a pencil or a marker and write your name somewhere on the piece of tape. So next week when you get here, you know which pumpkin is yours when it's time for plaster. Pause for today. Yay! All right, the next step is to use these plaster sheets to cover your pumpkin. I like to start with the bottom because it's nice and flat and it's just a good place to start. To use this material, you take it and you submerge it in water, and then you lift out, and you don't want it to be bunched, so you might have to kind of unfold it, and you lay it over the spot you'd like to cover. Then you kind of use it to mold to the shape. Now, this plaster is a little bit expensive, so I want you to make an effort not to layer multiple sheets of it. So for example, I'm not gonna put this sheet right on top where I just laid a sheet. I'm gonna go to a clean section that's plastic bag and tape, and I'm gonna lay it across. That's because this isn't a cheap material. It's a little bit pricey. So we want to conserve as much as we can. Again, I'm keeping it smooth, and I like to use my hand to smooth away the lines in the plaster. You'll notice that there are little like squares kind of. And if you have a wet hand and you smooth it, those will go away and it'll make your pumpkin have a more realistic pumpkin texture when it's done. All right, now I know I'm gonna get my table all dirty here, but no big deal. I'll wash it when I'm done because in just a second, I'm going to be flipping this over. Okay, and mine was a little bit wrinkled in the corner, so I'm gonna show you what happens if yours get wrinkled. We just kind of gently drape it to open it back up. And it can be a little bit hard to do. Again, trying not to create too much overlap. You want a tiny bit of overlap so there isn't plastic bag popping out, but you don't want too much overlap. And your hands are gonna get dirty today. That's going to happen, but don't worry, we'll wash hands when we're done. Okay, now I'm gonna flip it over because the base is done, and I know my table's gonna get dirty, that's okay. So I'm just continuing to dip and lay across. Smoothing. And you can even use your hand to kind of push it into those creases you made with the tape to make it look more pumpkin-esque. Smoothing and then turning. I'm gonna keep showing you because I do wanna show you how to do the little handle of the pumpkin, which can be tricky. So I'm just gonna go ahead and wrap it over. And when I do this, I might end up with like a couple layers of it. That's okay. So that's for the stem. And then I'll time lapse you while I finish wrapping my pumpkin. All right, so before you're done with your pumpkin, I want you to do a couple things. One is get your name on it. So I am just writing my name on this piece of tape. And then I'm just gonna loosely put that piece of tape on. I don't actually even want that tape to stick on my pumpkin eventually. I just want it to be kind of sitting on it, so that way next week I know whose it is. So we're gonna add name, and then just kind of look at it from all angles and make sure you got every spot. You can ask a neighbor to take a quick look at yours, make sure you covered every area, but mine looks ready to dry. All right, guys, my pumpkin is all white, but you will have painted yours in a color. And today we are going to channel Yayoi Kusama in polka dots, and we're gonna be using a Q-tip. I found that's the best way to do it. So what I don't want you to do is just start dotting all over. I know that her artwork looks really cool and polka dotted, but it's actually done in a pretty organized way. So what I'm gonna do is look for this kind of like lump or shelf on my pumpkin, and for each one of those, I'm gonna follow it up to the top. And from there, I'm going to make a line of dots that follows the part that sticks out the furthest. Then I'm gonna rotate my pumpkin and find the other bump. From the bump, I'm going up to the stem and making a line of dots that follows down that bump. Now, if you want to lift yours and flip it so you can see the bottom, that's fine, you're welcome to. But since these sculptures will be displayed by sitting down on the ground or a table, I'm okay with you leaving the bottom empty for the polka dots if you would prefer. Okay, I'm keeping working like that. And in some places it can be a little bit tricky because like right here, it's hard for me to tell if that's a bump. No big deal. I got a little bit of mine there. If that happens to you, we can take paint in the color that you painted your pumpkin and touch that up. Since this is just a practice one, I'm not gonna worry about it. So bump up to the stem, line of dots. All right, this is my last bump, and then I'm gonna start to fill the space in between. Okay, so I went around and I did all the bumps. Now I'm gonna go to all the recesses, the spots where it goes in. And I'm gonna do that same thing where I'm making a line, it goes up to the stem, and it's like halfway between my two dot sections from before. Turn! Boom, boom, boom. So getting those recessed areas. Recess doesn't only mean playing outside at recess. A recess can mean a low point. And you'll notice that I'm trying to space them pretty evenly. I'm not like doing one here, then one right on top of the other one. I'm trying to make the space in between as equal as possible. Okay, and now I can go in between these lines. So in between that line, I'm gonna make another line of my polka dots. Turn, and do the same thing. Now, you might notice that in some of your spaces, it's a little bit tighter than others, like right here, for example, and I'll show you when I get there. So if I put my dot right up at the top there, they're all gonna be on top of each other. So I'm kind of trying to keep them equally spaced. Then I'm gonna turn it. Okay, these are real close together, so I can make a choice. Maybe I decide to start my dots down here, so that way they're not too close together, because I don't want them to be like on top of each other, because then I'll lose my color, and I want to see my color. Same thing here. If I start it up there, they're going to be all on top of each other, so I'm just scooting down a little bit before I start. Same thing here. They're awfully close together, so I'm starting them lower to kind of give it some space. Whoa, I have like no space there, so I'm just like totally skipping that spot. If I made dots there, it would just be a whole mess of dots. And you'll notice that some of my places are a little bit uneven. I'm not worrying if my dot doesn't translate totally. Like for example, right there, it's not a perfect circle. I'm not gonna worry too much about it. I can, if my Q-tip is starting to get kind of fuzzy, I can flip it over to the other side, and sometimes I can get a cleaner dot with a new, not used part of the Q-tip. All right, now I'm getting somewhere. Now I'm gonna go up onto my stem, and I'm just gonna make a line of dots spaced about equally. Line of dots there. So I'm kind of trying to mimic the spaces I saw there. As I'm turning it, I do need to be careful when I'm holding that stem that I'm not smearing all the dots I made. I'm kind of being sure to go around them. All right, now I have a super cool polka dotted pumpkin. It definitely needs to wait to be dried. If I picked it up and moved it around right now, my hands would be a black mess, my pumpkin would be a black mess. So I'm just gonna leave it there to dry for a few.